are exported back to Africa, and they undermine local production. So the issue of intellectual property rights protection is a key requirement for start-up operators to emerge. There are also other infrastructure needs. One of these is energy. Throughout Africa, there's a critical energy shortage. As we are talking right now, about 600 million Africans lack access to electricity. And for the firms, when there's no electricity, it means you stop production or you produce at low capacity. So the governments really have put a lot in energy generation. We are living in a world of information and communication technologies. In quite a number of countries across Africa, the products of ICT are mainly enjoyed in the urban areas, where there is electricity and infrastructure for communication. The task is to really broaden the availability of infrastructure to cover all corners of Africa, so that there are creators emerging even from the rural areas. Because what innovators bring up can be used anywhere, in the urban areas and in the rural areas. So we welcome this panel on entrepreneurship and innovation with a focus on startups, because they address what is at stake for Africa. We can no longer rely on production of primary goods. They are losing value almost every year. And as a result of that, they are eroding Africa's share of global trade. So when you innovate, you bring something distinctive, something which cannot be imitated, although of course that is very, very difficult, but through intellectual property rights protection, people will not be able to imitate. And you bring it something which you can sell, and the process of selling, you grow your company. So I invite you to really discuss all these issues and come up with a roadmap to move us into implementing all the issues that need to bring us to mobilize entrepreneurship and innovation across Africa. The reformed Department of Economic Development, Trade, Industry, and Mining has subunits on entrepreneurship and innovation because of their importance to the prosperity of Africa. So whatever you discuss, we're going to study and make use of them. So I'll leave it at that. I'm running from room to room opening meetings. Now I have to go into the next room for the Trade Observatory, and another meeting with the International Trade Center, and later a meeting with the youth startup operators. I would have loved to be with you, but it's not possible. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Can you hear me? There we go. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And we appreciate the work that you do, and we know you're very busy, so we're hoping, Your Excellency Muchanga, that when we meet again, we can actually talk about some of the outcomes of this Intra-Africa Trade Fair. We know that the problems for startups and for entrepreneurs are Sisyphean a lot of the time, but these challenges can be overcome, and policy is one way to alleviate that pressure. I'm honored to announce our panelists today to take us through the conversation and to drive forward a lot of what His Excellency Muchanga had to share with us. Honorable Deputy Minister of Small Business Development, Sidumo Dlamini. Welcome, sir. If you could join us, please, on stage. A round of applause for the Honorable Deputy Minister. Dr. Patrick Olomo, Coordinator for Innovation Program at the African Union. Yusuf Daya, Trade Policy Director at Afrixim. Do you guys all need some coffee? I don't know. Can we order coffee everyone in here. Mulaluam Asyum, CEO, Chairman, AE Trade Group. And Lasina Kone, CEO of Smart Africa Secretariat, who has become a very good friend in just one day, because I think before we start, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, that it took us a long time to try and get into this IATF, but we are all here, and it shows our commitment to coming and having these conversations and sharing it with all of you. So thank you very much. Take a seat, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Fantastic. Lucina, welcome. I'm glad to see you this morning. Take a seat. All right, gentlemen, we have a lot to get through, and also I'd just like to tell the audience that we are going to be coming to you for some questions and inputs, so please prepare your thoughts. Deputy Minister, I would like to start with you. And you know, one question that came up is just what the success and failure rate is of small businesses on the continent. And there have been numbers that have been thrown around, and they pretty much vary. But money is not enough. It comes down to skills. It comes down to education. It comes down to so many issues. Could you give me a sense of what is happening in South Africa right now in terms of success and failure rates, and whether you are, you know, focusing on the challenge of firstly funding and things like skills?
Thank you very much, and good morning to my colleagues and the House at large. On the question that is being raised, indeed, even here in South Africa, we do have a serious challenge, particularly on youth employment. I'm starting with that point because it's above 63% of our youth in South Africa, learned and less learned, are not working. They don't have their own businesses to run, and as government, we're trying to do the best we can, targeting the youth and women in particular, because also a huge percentage of unemployment in South Africa is affecting women. So if I were to talk percentages, indeed, very, very high unemployment, but we're doing the best we can as a country in small business development.
Do you feel that within the small business development space, we've made headway in ensuring that small enterprises and entrepreneurs are getting the support that they need? And we're not talking just about funding. We're also saying skills development so that they know how to navigate the challenges.
It is indeed about skills.
More than money, would you say?
More than money, because sometimes we do provide the little financial support that we can on the few that we are able, but you would have a large percentage of those failing to take off on their businesses. So the issue of training, developing the skills, and also identifying, in particular in the rural areas, it's a space that we have to ensure that we do our work as the department.
Thank you for sharing that reality with us, because it's a serious one. Mulaluam, great to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining us. I was fascinated by the fact that you've been very involved in the formation of this trade fair, this year's trade fair, but you've also, interestingly, have supported about 150 startups in the lead up to the IATF. Could you give me a sense of what kind of companies you're working with, what kind of entrepreneurs you're working with, and importantly, what their biggest challenge is that they say, listen, this is what we need help with. Is it money? Is it something else?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Well, when we talk about youth, this continent is the youth continent. We see a number of youth coming to the job market every year is growing. And we see an opportunity and we see the challenges. An opportunity that our leaders has given us, the ASEFTA, that every youth can have the market, that 1.2, 1.3 billion marketplace that you could be able to compete with. At the same time, the challenge is that for any idea, the youth coming, any innovation that is coming, we do not have a proper support. A support of capacities. A capacity not just only finance, but knowledge. A capacity to be a backbone for the youth and encouraging their innovative abilities. There is so many smart young entrepreneurs coming to the market, but because of support that we have challenges that they cannot be excelled, and we cannot be able to nurture. And you mentioned about the 150 youths that we are sponsoring for this event. It's just the starting. Because the youth, about 12 million youths come into the job market every single year. And every government's question is how we could be able to engage and address and utilize these resources in the most positive way. Yeah. And one of them is, instead of the youth waiting, looking for a job to the government, but to be self-sufficient and self-employee. So that entrepreneurship, that can, how we could be able to support in the capacity. The A-Trade Group is providing a capacity building, not just only on the financial sector, but also on the know-how to create the job. So what we did is, for those, any innovation that they do in the digital economy, we build a cloud computing infrastructure where all the youth, either a high school graduate or a PhD researcher, where they can be able to experiment their abilities, innovations on the technology. They can develop an applications. And not just only facilitating the tools and the resources, but also we will be there, we have building the largest laboratory to be able to test their applications, maintaining their intellectual property that we could be able also to bring it to the market. So what we're trying to bring here is the new creation of the starting point of Africa can be a proper shareholder of the digital economy. Yeah. The digital economy where it is reached today, $23 trillion. So that is in the digital part. Yeah. But in the rest of the market part is we came up last year in partnership with the African Union called, we bring up a marketplace called Sokuku.Africa. Sokuku.Africa is a marketplace for any startup. They can bring and display their product. And we give them also a training material that changing the mindset to be competitive, changing the mindset aligning with their business plan. So that is the other element. Now, why did we sponsor this 150? That's the main question that came up, is this is the starting on the second Africa Intra-Trade Fair that we are sponsoring the youth to come here and bringing that exposure. But we don't stop there. We will be monitoring you, all of you, the 150, that we want to see the progress. We want to see the graduation in 4-year time, that you are moving from the startup as solid business entrepreneurs. We follow you, we support you with all the resources that we are bringing up.
Thank you very much. That's fascinating. Well done. Lucina, welcome. You know, we're talking about the continental free trade area, and we think about it physically, right? We think about the physical movement of people. We're thinking about, you know, opening up airspace. We think about how businesses can work with each other to trade physical goods, but you're taking it up to the ether. You're thinking about a single digital market and what that would mean. So give me a sense of what you're achieving at Smart Africa, because it's easy to say, you know, Africa has the ability to create smart cities, but we're seeing nodes of things that are smart in certain places on the continent, but we're still so far away from creating a single sort of digital platform.
Can you hear me? Mike?
There we go.
Okay, yeah. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, it's all Smart Africa, first of all, in a nutshell, it's a Pan-African multilateral organization created in 2013 by 7 heads of the state, endorsed by the African Union in 2014. And today, Smart Africa accounts for 32 countries. Why Smart Africa? Because we have transforming Africa into a single digital market. And I know single digital market by 2030, but it will happen before 2030. Because today we have all the ingredients. You heard the commissioner say, you heard also my predecessor saying, but it will need some real organizations and restructuring ourselves. Yeah. Taken from what the commissioner said, in reality, 15, 20 years ago, we were not really seeing the young people as a resource, as an alternative resource. Yeah. All we used to do, all we were doing, go to school, you get a job with the government. That's a reality. And the new fact today, the young people, they're not looking to work for the government. They want to be an entrepreneur. Because the government cannot employ everyone. The private sector is driving the economies. So, in the light of that, and we see inadequacy between what is being taught in our education system and what is out there in the market, that explains the unemployment is not adequate. So what do we do? I see the youth and young generations, I see them like water. The water always finds its way, no matter what. So they will innovate. So we came from zero less than 5 years ago, as you were saying. We attracted $1 billion in 2019. As I'm speaking today, we are going to attract in 2021 more than $2 billion out of nothing. Wow. So shall our government be sit not doing anything, not regulating? That's what the commissioner is calling for, and that's what Smart Africa is calling for. Subsequent to the African Union call in 2018 for a startup, Smart Africa will launch a startup flagship led by Tunisia, as you can see today, for legislation for the entrepreneurs. Tunisia, Senegal, Mali, Ghana, Uganda, Kenya.
Are those countries doing well because they've got the right policies in place, would you say? It's the policy that, changes the trajectory.
It is a policy to recognize those entrepreneurs as individuals, as entities. And Tunisia actually go very far. They go even to give them sometimes tax exempt for the next 2 to 3 years to alleviate some burden of them.
So I'm curious, do you have any companies that you're working with right now that can help us alleviate the issue of the tags that we needed to get physically here at an event like this, that we can go digital and electronic? That was meant to be a joke. I was hoping you guys would laugh, but no one's catching it. Do you have any companies that you're working with that can solve this problem for the future? Lassina?
Yes, of course.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that's all I needed to hear was a yes, right? And this is also a challenge for all of you. How can we make the registration process for any conference easier going forward?
Yes.
Dr. Olomo, I'd like for you to jump in here. You are, in charge of innovation at the African Union. How are you thinking about, creating and galvanizing more innovation on the continent? Are you looking first at the policy frameworks? Do you look at that first, or do you look for ideas? How are you approaching this at the AU?
Thank you very much, Eleni. The first thing I would like to say is that what we have to be mindful of is that innovation will be at the center of what we are planning to do with a view to achieving Africa's transformation. So innovation is a central point that we should stress on. And at the African Union Commission, and you have heard the Commissioner insisting on the fact that if we do invest in youth startups that are here and others that are developing in our countries, we are going to be able to take advantage of the huge potential of the AFCFTA. Because what we have to be mindful of is that startups are at the center of Africa's transformation. And yesterday, you have listened to all the speeches, of our leaders that were gathered here in this room. What they said 3 things, fundamentally. Yeah. They said there is need for focusing on what I call the 3IT. 3IT. The first I stand for integration, so there is need for integration. An integrated continent of 1.2 billion people with, the huge amount of resource that we can pull out to make sure that we are able to develop. That's one innovation in integration. The second point was based on the fact that there is need for investment. So we need to, increase investment within the continent to make sure that we are able to invest, as the Commissioner rightly said, in transport, in infrastructure, in energy, in skills. So this investment needs to be put forward in such a way that we are able to equip, the young generation with the skills that are needed to match the needs of the job market, because the job market today is very competitive. Yeah. The third point is industrialization, and we have to insist on that because without industrialization, we are not going to be able to take advantage of our CFTA, because everybody is focusing on the trade aspect of the CFTA. But we are forgetting that the trade aspect of the CFTA is just the consequence of production. Yeah. So we need to produce first to make sure that trade is able to be flowing well between our countries. So production is the key essential point. Let me give you a figure. We have imported since some few decades, and we know that statistics are available. We are importing every year not less than $110 billion US, all the countries. This is extremely huge. If we talk about pharmaceuticals, we have just recently rediscovered that we are importing not less than $60 billion per year. So imagine the magnitude of investment that are needed to make sure that we are able to take advantage of the industrialization of the continent. Because if we do industrialize, we are not going to let these resources flow out of the continent. So that's the third point. Now, the T point that I raised in my intervention is about trade. So trade is the last part of it. I am not undermining the fact that trade is a central point, to spur economic transformation and development. No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if we just focus on trade today, we are going to miss the opportunity of positioning Africa in the next steps of its development, which is economic transformation. So young entrepreneurs that are here today, gathered, are supposed to be encouraged in production because they have to be capacitated enough to produce the goods that we are going to use tomorrow in our market. If not, we are going just to be ending up being a market where we are using imported goods. Which is not the case.
You're pro the sort of the tech and the digital space where you see a lot of e-commerce businesses coming up, fintech businesses coming up, e-health and so forth. But you're saying we mustn't forget the production side of things as well, and we've got to think about that when we're industrializing.
Yeah, we have to think about the whole picture, because it is true that when we talk about industrialization, it is a key, because when you look at the productive transformation process, we need to start from there. We need to start by producing first, and then we transit to the so-called digital economy. And yesterday, I remember that we had a discussion,
The scene is a few steps ahead,
yes.
Thinking about digital economy first.
So, we have just leapfrog, as my brother here said yesterday, Lassina Kone, that we have just, went a step ahead, but there is need for us to look back and make sure that we are able to take advantage of what we have on the ground now. We have a market of 1.2 billion people that is expected to grow 2.7 billion people in 2013, 2014. There is need for us to concentrate on production to make sure that we are able to take advantage of that market.
Thank you. So Yusuf, AfricSim has been taking such a leading role and pioneering role in so many ways when it comes to the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area, and we mustn't forget that. AfricSim has really been a leader, thinking about solutions, cross-border solutions, thinking generally about how countries are going to implement, and you're trying to support businesses. In the same breath, you also have deep pockets because you've got money to give, right? And that makes us very happy here. So what kind of startups are you interested right now? And I know that you're really thinking about industrialization, you're thinking about supply chains, you're thinking about value adding, to our commodities. How does that play into what you're doing for startups?
Thank you very much, Eleni, and thank you to the African Union Commission for inviting us to be a part of this panel. I think, Eleni, maybe just before I go into what the bank is doing and how we support it, I think if I can share maybe a personal story.
Yeah.
I studied economics back in the 1990s. And when we studied economics, we learned about factors of production: land, labor, and capital. I've had the fortune of my daughter getting an interest in economics, and she asked me to help her with her homework recently. And when I looked at the factors of production, I saw a fourth that I had never seen, which was innovation and entrepreneurship.
So that was added in to the curriculum since you had studied?
Yeah, so I think it's this mindset change that is needed. We have the capital, we have the resources, we have the land. We need the innovation and we need the entrepreneurship. And this is going to come from our young population. 33% of our population is below the age of 35. It's a reality that we need to take into account, whichever industry we're supporting. Whatever good you produce, you need to find an innovative way to get it to the market, an innovative way to sell it, or an innovative way to differentiate it. So the bank, while we work largely on industrialization and value addition, as you indicated, the issue of innovation and entrepreneurship is inescapable. So the bank has developed a SME development program to try to support some of this. And it includes, it's largely an integrated, cross-cutting solution that provides both financial as well as non-financial support. You mentioned in your opening, Eleni, that Africa invested around 1 billion in startups. That number has gone up. It's gone up to around 1.7 billion last year. But if you compare it to a country like Singapore, and we're talking a continent compared to a country like Singapore with 5 to 6 million people, Singapore invested 4 billion in startups last year. I think this just shows the gulf that needs to be bridged in Africa. So the bank is putting in place a number of financial and non-financial instruments to support startups across a range of sectors, from agribusiness, light manufacturing, technology, creatives, financial services, hospitality, logistics. And what it does, it provides a set of interventions through guarantees, lines of credit, whether it be through traditional financial institutions or non-bank financial institutions that can reach down to those startups with a view to providing some of the patient capital that is needed to support them. Our non-financial interventions include technical assistance and capacity building, business support services, trade information. The bank has initiated an African Trade Gateway, which is a suite or ecosystem of digital solutions that can support businesses from large corporates all the way down to startups to enable them to engage in intra-African trade, to connect, and ensure that they are able to do business under the AFCFTA. And I think finally, at the anchor of our program is an incubation program, which is structured to provide technical assistance to those high-potential startups and SMEs to drive intra-African trade and export development. So this will include support for startups across business phases, whether you be in your incubation phase at your startup, whether you be at a stage of needing some acceleration through mentorship, early stage development, guidance on business, and as well when you've reached a particular stage for you to scale up your operations and really take it forward. We're working with a number of tech companies and other partners, and in fact, later this afternoon, we will be having the CNN Evolve event in I think, the room behind us. And I encourage everyone to come and participate, where we'll see a number of these startups showing their skills and their opportunities. We've also given great support to the creative sector because we realize a lot of potential for our startups exists in the creative sector. We've committed a $500 million facility to support the creative industry. We have a huge Kennex program which kicks off later this week to showcase some of that creative potential across the continent. So I think the bank is taking a leading role as well, not only on the industrialization and value addition, but realizing that the potential for Africa and Africa's future rests with our youth, and that needs to be addressed. Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you very much, Joseph. That was fantastic. Really interesting to hear what Africsm is doing. And yes, we invite you to our session. We're going to be hearing from amazing startups as well as unicorns that have emerged out of Africa. So that'll be happening later in the day. I'm going to take a couple of questions, and then we're going to go for closing statements as well. Who's got questions? Show of hands. Anyone? Yes. The lady in the front. Do we have a roving mic, please? We are waiting for the microphone. Okay, while we wait for that, sorry, we will get a microphone to you very shortly. Deputy Minister, I want you to jump in here and talk. I want you to give me a sense of South Africa's experience within growing our startup space, growing our entrepreneurs, and how that can help with transforming economies on the continent.
Indeed, having to identify that challenge for South Africa is very, very critical, because we cannot transform our society unless we know where the challenge is. We have entities, I can mention them in their names here. We've got SIDA, we've got SIFA, we've got other entities that are assisting, but as government, we don't have large sums of money, but it is those entities that are supposed to assist in skills development, in training of those that require to be assisted in building their small businesses, which are not supposed to end up being small businesses. There's an ecosystem because you build from small, medium range, you grow to be a bigger business. And proper supervision and proper provision of startup packs for those that would have taken the initiative are assisted. And as I said earlier on, the rural areas are very, very critical. Yeah. If we have to really see ourselves productively developing our economy. And it is the youth again that has got to be assisted. It is the women that have got to be assisted. So South Africa is indeed engaged in that process of supporting entrepreneurship and small enterprise development in those areas.
I'm so glad, Deputy Minister, that you're saying we're not going to forget about the women that are stuck in rural areas. You know, and often they're carrying water, or they're selling eggs, or they're in the informal sector, and it's important to think about them as well. So that's very encouraging. Thank you, Madam. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Maria Emanuel, and I'm one of the 150 startups, and I'm from Namibia.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm actually involved in international trade, cross-border trade, market access. But my intervention is really to look at the movement of business persons, especially for us youth startups. For us to actually, drive intra-Africa trade, to forge partnerships on the continent, we need movement of business persons. And I will share with you that I'm from Namibia, so I don't need a visa to come to South Africa. But most of my colleagues, they were struggling with visas just to come to an intra-Africa trade fair. And I'm really challenging the team, the whole team, that we probably need African passports. Make that decision like a boom decision for us to be able to move on the continent so that we are able to actually create these networks. We cannot move goods without services. And the other one, the last one perhaps, is that as youth startups, we are becoming overtrained and underfunded. And I think I will also appreciate really to unpack that financial capital issue. A lot of initiatives on the continent, of course, is training, boot camp, incubation, which is really relevant at the early stage. But I think there's a bigger now ecosystem created that just needs funding. All my colleagues, most of them, they just need money. We just need money to go home and, just implement these initiatives. So that's just my intervention, please. African passport for the youth startups, and then to see how we can create a funding model that is unique to African startups. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for raising that, because I've also heard anecdotally that some people have had major issues. So we'll pose that to the audience. Sir, let me take one more question over here, please. Okay, got to sanitize first. We've got quite a few questions, actually. Okay, Deputy Minister, do you want to handle that quickly on the visa issue?
Young people to bring here. They are not here.
Yes. We're welcoming people to South Africa, and we can't get visas for business
from
people.
Nigeria, from DRC. We still have...
Yeah, we should be able to comment on that point because if you're familiar with the South African situation, sometimes that becomes the point of contention, and at times we bring accusations to those who are coming into South Africa purely because of the space to do business in South Africa and make a mistake of closing out those that can help strengthen South Africa's capacity to grow in that space. So working together and assisting one another, as my sister was talking there, it would be very, very critical that on the visa work, South Africa's priority is not purely based and inward looking or looking outside Africa, but we must look into Africa as a whole and understand that Africans within the continent are capacitated also to properly come into the country and help do work that has got to be done.
Are you concerned about the message that it's sending to entrepreneurs and businesses because there have been visa challenges? Do you think we can change that?
We can always improve.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take one more question from the audience because we're running out of time. I committed in front here, I'm so sorry. Do you have the microphone? Where is this elusive mic? I'm losing it all the time. Thank you, sir. Oh, sorry, I gave the question to the gentleman behind you. I'm sorry. I made eye contact. I committed,
Hi, my name is Sidiki Savadogo. I come from Burkina Faso in West Africa. I'm a young startup. I want to make an observation of the CNN representative on biggest challenge of youth. Now, for me, the biggest challenge of youth entrepreneur in Africa is primary opportunity like this, which permit youth to shine, to show of world her talent. Because now the youth not afraid to take initiative in entrepreneurship and innovation field in all domains, agriculture, technology, lot of things. So the secondary, I think, is a form them, and open them the world, the African market and world opportunity. The 3 steps is to support them with financial resources. So this is a 3 step, because the real problem is not financially in primary.
Yeah.
And permit me to finish. I know my English is not strong.
Thank you. We're running out of time. Sorry, we don't have much time.
Okay, I'm finished.
To wrap. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to finish with this. I think the African youth is a category of population which know a real problem of African countries. So give them an opportunity and list them.
Thank you for your intervention. Thank you. I'm going to just take one more question and then we're going to do wrap-up comments, because I feel that getting the audience to speak to us has been very interesting to hear your thoughts. There's a lady right in front here. If there's a microphone. Thank you. We're getting the mic thing right, which is great, eventually. Madam.
Allô? Bonjour, je suis Asamoah Sobi Flora. I want to explain. I come from Ivory Coast, and in my country we speak French.
Yes.
Your English is very fast, and we don't catch really what you said. I won the competition about startups, and I want to know if you can help us who speak French originally to catch really what you said.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's an organizer issue. We should have had translation. I wish that was in my control. Fantastic. Let's do, Dr. Olomo, do you want to come in here?
Yes. Madame, s'il vous plaît, pouvez-vous vous asseoir? Parce que la réponse à votre question, en principe, elle est donnée à l'extérieur. Il y a des équipements qui auraient dû être distribués pour avoir une traduction. Malheureusement, ils sont dehors et je pense qu'il y a une cabine de traduction qui est en train de faire une traduction simultanée. So I just wanted to let her know that there is simultaneous interpretation because outside, I think there is a booth. She was supposed to collect the equipment, unfortunately. But let me, as I have the floor, to respond to the question related to the passport, the Pan-African passport. What you have to know, what we have to be mindful of is that the African Union Commission is working tirelessly to make sure that, business people are able to move smoothly within the continent. And this is why when the protocol that is establishing the AFCFTA was signed in Kigali, was annexed to it a protocol on free movement of persons. But if you look at the status of signature and ratification that comes from member states, the problem is on your member states, in fact. So you should talk to your government, to your leaders, to let them know that you are facing challenges with regards to this free movement of people and goods within the continent, because they are the ones to address the questions. At the African Union Commission, as I said before, the policies are in place.
Yeah.
The only thing that is remaining is implementation. If there is no implementation, you are going to continue facing the same challenges. The policies are in place, so let's implement them.
Thank you very much. Exactly, implementations. We've got the ideas, we just need to put them into action. I would like to get a last comment from each of you as we wrap up. Mulaloyam, I'd like to start with you, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. You can see the number of questions came up from the youth. It is to the core. And we are promoting that a market to 1.2, 1.3 billion population, and one of the enabling environment to create that market is visa, definitely, and that is something seriously government need to look at it throughout the continent. How we could be able to sensitize, as my colleague just said, the African Union is working very hard to create that enabling environment. That is work in progress. But for those innovators, some of the core question is that from a colleague from Afreximbank, as it was mentioned, my colleague from Smart Africa, private sectors together aligning to sensitize this capacity building in knowledge, on finance and technology, and the idea without physical concept or development can be able to finance it, can be able to support in knowledge. Government can be able to create that enabling environment on policymakers. So we see the bright future for the youth. Thank you.
Thank you. And please feel free to comment on any on the questions that we got from the audience as we wrap up. Yusuf, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. With my AFC hat, I don't know if my microphone is working.
There we go. Try again.
Can you check it?
We have interference.
Hello?
I don't know where it's coming from.
Check it again.
Yeah, is that thanks, Eleni. And I think from my side, I think the comments raised from the floor, the issues of visas, the issues of movement of people, are critical if we want to pursue our African integration agenda, and if we want to create an environment where co-creation is possible, particularly in the innovation space and entrepreneurship. The African Continental Free Trade Area is starting to address some of these issues through the Protocol on Trade in Services, allowing the movement of business people. But as my colleague said, yeah, there is a protocol on the movement of people. It's a question of implementation. We don't need new policies. We need to implement what we have and make sure that the youth speak to their governments, put the pressures on them, that the policies are there, have them implemented and facilitate that. And on the issue of finance, in conclusion, we know it's an issue, it's a perennial issue, not only for youth startups, but across the continent. Absolutely. We are capital scarce. And we as the bank, working with our partners, will continue to work to try to bridge that gap.
Thank you. We're out of time, so very quickly, Lasina. Last comment. Sorry, I know you can't hear me well, actually.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time, but if I have a message to conclude, really, you call young people, you are called startup is because you innovate. You innovate because you are disruptive. Even for the visa implementation, you have to disrupt your government. Because the law is there, the implementation is the issue. As I said, young people always find another way. They always find a way to solve the solution. Keep on putting pressure on the government. The government is like a big elephant. They move very slowly. But when they start moving, they don't stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Lasina. Deputy Minister, a final word as we wrap up.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, clearly from the inputs that we have made here and the questions that have arisen, the targeting of the youth and women to develop also the Youth Challenge Fund, which we are doing here in South Africa in order to enhance youth entrepreneurship. The Youth Challenge Fund is a youth startup support program intended to stimulate establishment and growth of their businesses.
Brilliant. That's very exciting. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for putting women at the forefront, I have to say. A big round of applause for our fantastic panelists, for your insights, for giving us a sense of what you're doing and the fact that you're so committed to startups and the fact that you're willing to spend money on them and time for skills development is very encouraging. And I wish you all the best. And I hope to see you at the next IATF, where we'll be talking about the startups that you've been helping turn into unicorns and billion-dollar businesses. I cannot wait for that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Apparently, you did such a good job that they want to take a photograph of you. Can you all stand in the front there and take a photograph? You've become stars of the sessions. So quickly, we don't have a lot of time. So if you want to take a photograph, you have 5 seconds to do it. In a 5. How fast is this guy now? 5, 4, 3. Is he fast?
I should have done this with the microphone, right? Yeah. I should have counted down for getting the mics. Do you want me to do the middle? Okay, fine. Yes.
The speakers in the next panel, if you could just make your way over there to the technical area where the other speakers are. You know who you are for this. This is the session that was supposed to have started the day. If you are in the room, apparently we're missing a couple of you. If you could go over there to Wally, who is the moderator. He's got his hand up now. Quickly get over there and he will bring you onto stage. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Wonderful session. We're going to soldier on because we're a little bit behind time, so we can claw back some time. That was very interesting. We've got quite a few other interesting sessions to go. Now, multilateral financial institutions, or MFIs, are busy across the continent, spurring economic growth and sustainable development. I'll just wait until this panel leaves and then I'll continue. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, multilateral financial institutions, or MFIs, are very busy across the continent, spurring economic growth and sustainable development. And they're doing that by providing access to finance, like credits and grants, and offering their much needed expertise. And so this session will access the impacts of MFIs, especially in the era of the AFCFTA. It is moderated by CNBC Africa's Wole Famurewa, who is going to join us on the stage now with his panel. As he comes onto the stage, give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'm sure you enjoyed the last session. We're going to try to be very efficient while the panelists gets mic'd up. We're going to get right into it. I think Mark has set the tone very well. And so what I'm going to do right now is to just invite to deliver a short, if you like, opening speech to set the tone for the session. Mr. Amer Kamel, he's the Executive Vice President, Business Development and Corporate Banking at the Afrexim Bank. He'll be speaking for a few minutes and then we'll get right into the panel. So please, if you can, put your hands together for him. Thank you very much. Amer?
Same here. And you're here for a while or going back to Joburg? Oh, same. I'm leaving on Thursday. Back to Joburg. No. No, I'm not because I'm on leave that week. Yeah.
Honorable and distinguished members of the audience, our esteemed panelist members, members of the press, friends, colleagues, a very good morning to you all on this lovely day of Durban on this second day of the Intra-African Trade Fair. It gives me great pleasure to address you this morning on a topic that is the cornerstone of the work of every financial institution and the heartbeat of every business present here, which is trade in Africa. It is one of the most important drivers of economic growth on our continent. Many African nations have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic as trade flows were affected, thereby hindering economic growth over many months, which has highlighted how vital trade finance support is. Africa's trade finance gap was already estimated at about 110 to 120 billion, and the pandemic has increased this gap considerably. Africa's share of global trade has decreased steadily from 4.4% to 3%. In addition, commercial banks that are operating across Africa have reassessed their risk appetite, which has only exacerbated the problem. However, the expression "adversity creates opportunity" could not be more relevant. African DFIs have stepped up in the face of the challenges. Their response has been robust and many innovative solutions have been provided, as I'm sure you will hear from our esteemed panelists. African DFIs are becoming the most relevant financial institutions, not only for the continent's recovery, but in aiding the wave of transformation that is being experienced across Africa. For example, Afrexim Bank is on the front lines in dealing with the impact of the pandemic. We were catalytic in vaccine procurement financing, working with AVAT and providing a 2 billion guarantee, as well as financing to support the acquisition of 400 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for African member states. We have also provided a $3 billion pandemic trade impact mitigation facility at the outset of the pandemic, as well as 1.5 billion collaborative COVID-19 pandemic response facility, working alongside our partners like ITFC and Badea. While these initiatives have assisted greatly in providing the much-needed support to our African economies, we need to remain focused on the broader goal of achieving growth and transformation on the African continent. Infrastructure investment is critical for regional integration in Africa, especially in the context of the AFCFTA. Many African economies are moving away from being heavily commodity dependent and taking the necessary steps towards decommoditizing their exports and implementing industrialization strategies. One of the key factors inhibiting industrialization has been the insufficient infrastructure in power, water, and transportation that would allow companies to thrive in industries with strong competitive advantages. Africa's trade is characterized by limited intra-regional activity compared to other continents. Afreximbank has implemented various innovative financing and non-financing programs to enable African businesses to be prepared to take advantage of the AFCFTA and boost intra-African trade, partnering with the AU, the AFCFTA Secretariat, UNECA, the African governments, and international manufacturers and processors to promote value addition in member countries. Flagship initiatives include the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, coined as PAPS, the AFCFTA Adjustment Facility, the Africa Collaborative Transit Guarantee System, and other trade and industrial infrastructure-related programs, all of which constitute the backbone of the AFCFTA. What we're doing, while significant, is merely a fraction of what is needed on the continent, given the significant financing gap that panelists may speak about. We therefore need the collaborative efforts of all DFIs and our partners to pool our collective resources to be able to mobilize the much-needed support for Africa. Adding to the significant trade finance gap on the continent is a lack of support for SMEs. In Africa, SMEs provide an estimated 80% of jobs across the continent, representing an important driver of economic growth. They are among the most significant contributors to African economies, but seem to attract the lowest amount of support from banks. One can argue that the detracting factor that has led to fewer banks supporting SMEs is the issue of costs versus benefit. There are stringent anti-money laundering and know-your-customer measures, along with new Basel regulations, all of which have imposed higher costs on financial institutions in the trade finance sector, resulting in fewer banks engaging in African trade activities with SMEs. That is why the bank has also developed the MANSA platform, the one-stop KYC AML portal, to address this concern. DFIs can play a more significant active role in supporting SMEs. The business-as-usual approach adopted by DFIs by supporting commercial banks and funding lines is not enough. DFIs have to come up with innovative approaches to mobilize the much-needed funding support for SMEs, many of which could not survive the pandemic and others that are on the brink of collapse. Let me conclude by quoting the words of the great Nelson Mandela. I dream of the realization of the unity of Africa, whereby its leaders combine in their efforts to solve the problems of this continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we are making good strides in fulfilling this vision, but more needs to be done if we are to liberate our continent economically after our forefathers have liberated them politically. This impact can only be achieved when we work together, combining our resources and efforts. I leave you with this call to action, esteemed panelists, and I'm confident that such a high-profile panel will provide enriching ideas and advice for all of us to benefit from. I thank you for your kind attention and look forward to interacting with all of you in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamel. Are you going to join us? Please, by all means. Thank you very much. All right, so that hopefully set the tone for what should be a very, very important conversation about multilateral institutions and their role in driving greater trade on the continent. So I'm going to get right into it, but before I do, let me just quickly introduce speakers. They are already all seated. I'm starting with Mr. Admasu Tadesi. He's the President and CEO of the Trade and Development Bank. It's great to have you here, sir. We also have Sanjeev Gupta, the Executive Director and a board member of the Africa Finance Corporation. We have Mr. Serge Ekwe, who is the President of the West African Development Bank. Also joining us today is Engineer Hani Salem Sonbol, who is the CEO of the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation. And we have Mr. Solomon Queno, Vice President, Private Sector Infrastructure and Industrialization at the Africa Development Bank Group. And we also have joining us here today, Mr. Emanuel Asiak. He's the acting CEO of the Fund for Export Development in Africa. Now, you'll be hearing more about what they do because these are all development finance institutions. They are multilateral. They're making an impact. But before we get into it, I just wanted to say a couple of things about the role of multilateral development finance institutions. Now, as we know, Africa has many needs, but the last 2 years has really shocked the system for obvious reasons. I was just looking at some data concerning how much financing has come from multilateral and bilateral institutions going into infrastructure, specifically into Africa. And according to Baker McKinsey, that number has dropped actually from about 55 billion in 2019 to 33 billion. But what I think is very significant is that that number was 100 billion in 2014. So clearly we're not moving in the right direction in terms of the quantum of the investments that we'd like to see. Now we know, as I mentioned, the last 2 years have been very challenging, but hopefully things get better as we move forward. So I'd like to start with you, Solomon, if you can just give us some perspective on this point. The COVID-19 pandemic has obviously delivered huge challenges to businesses. The public and private sector have had felt their share of the pain. But let's speak about multilateral institutions and how the pandemic has impacted your business, maybe from a capital point of view and your activities in general. So can you just give us some color in that?
Thank you very much, Wale. I mean, so the clear answer to your question is that for the MFIs that were in capital raising mode, their capital raising activities have been impacted in a varied sense. However, in terms of really the activities, the initiatives of the MFIs, especially as it relates to what brings us here today, which is really around intra-African trade, I would say that that has not waned and that continues. For MFIs, part of our role is to be counter-cyclical, which means really as a result of a pandemic, we need to scale up to compensate, for the disruptions, across the financial system. That may be where, in some cases, we haven't really achieved the counter-cyclical scale that we hope to achieve to continue to support Africa, not only in terms of intra-African trade, but across the economic development agenda. Let me talk a little bit about the African Development Bank, and then I would also talk about how we may have impacted some of the African MFIs, because we are equity investors in almost all the African MFIs. So in terms of the African Development Bank, fortunately for us, in 2019, right before the pandemic, our shareholders, and when COVID happened, we went to the market and we issued a $3 billion Fight COVID social bond, which at that time was the highest US dollar denominated social bond ever issued in the international capital markets, showing very clear confidence in the African Development Bank in terms of really our role to help Africa in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic disruptions. We also went further. We set up an up to $10 billion crisis response facility. In our case, we work both with governments and also with private sector, which is unlike most of the other MFIs represented here today. So we set up a $10 billion crisis response facility. Finally, in doing all of this, we had to be very careful to make sure that our AAA, our international AAA credit rating was not adversely impacted. And I would like to say that, our AAA rating has been affirmed, by all the rating agencies with a stable outlook. And this is also very important because African governments who we serve, right now have limited fiscal space, high debt service burdens. So it's important that we are able to raise capital at the cheapest rate and transfer these benefits to our member governments, across Africa, as well as to the private sector that we invest in. So this is the case of the African Development Bank. However, the African Development Bank has an impact really on the broader Africa MFI system because, as I said before, we have equity investments in almost all the MFIs. Given that we made a strategic decision to pivot to really support African governments during this pandemic emergency period based on health, to reinforce health defense systems, to support MSMEs, which are the most vulnerable, private sector, and also to provide social safety net to the most marginalized groups. And in addition, given that we had to really, do everything to maintain our AAA rating, one of the impacts is that we had less resources to support, the capital raising efforts of the African MFIs that we're already equity investors in. However, this is the time to turn that around. It's been really, over 18 months to 2 years. And so, Serge, we plan to make an investment in Boade. At Masu, we plan to participate in the green shares as well to support. And in addition, we plan to also support Africa 50 because that's part of, our role as well. They're already doing, what we invested in them to do. But the idea is to also, help with the recapitalization to scale up their efforts, during this pandemic period. So overall, we continue to actually do what, we plan to do, and we plan to scale it up in terms of intra-African trade. Between 2020 and 2021, we plan to invest about $2 billion in CFTA-related activities, and we plan to also mobilize from partners another $2 billion. So we're talking about $4 billion, worth of investments and financing in CFTA-related projects, which would be the regional infrastructure projects, industrialization, et cetera. So our activities continue. I did hear a little bit about, the last panel talking about youth investments and also investments in women entrepreneurs. We have what we call the AFAWA program, where we plan to invest $5 billion in women-owned businesses over the next 5 years. We're pioneering, the youth entrepreneurship investment banks because we look at youth entrepreneurs as an investment asset class and not really, an empowered or an empowerment group. And of course, given that we've just finished with COP26, we would all appreciate that building client resilient regional infrastructure and infrastructure across Africa is going to be essential. So Wale, the news is positive. It's not negative. Yes, there might have been some minor disruptions at the beginning of COVID, but definitely some of us were able to actually continue our significant activities during that period, and we plan to scale up now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Solomon. Very comprehensive insight into your funding and how that is evolving. But we do actually have joining us virtually Mr. Sidi Tar, or Dr. Sidi Tar, the Director General of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa. So Dr. Tar, thank you so much for joining us as well this, it's probably afternoon where you are now, but give us your perspective on the role of multilateral development finance institutions, and perhaps speaking specifically about your role and how you are intervening in your member countries.
Thank you very much. The Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa is working with all these institutions. We do believe in partnership, and we do believe we cannot perform any substantial action without the partnership of all our partners who are sitting in this panel and elsewhere. So basically, the bank has been established to foster economic and social development in sub-Saharan Africa. And we do believe that the bank has been working in partnership with all these institutions to provide substantial support to African countries. As far as the economic integration of African countries, the bank is supporting the economic integration through three main areas. First, through infrastructure. And the bank is proud to have contributed to the financing of more than 200 road projects linking African countries, and particularly the landlocked countries, and bringing goods and services and letting goods and services moving across Africa. The bank also has been active in supporting port projects, as well as some railways projects and many airport projects. The bank recently also get interested in supporting the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure. As you know, COVID-19 showed the importance of developing the digital infrastructure in Africa to make it easier for people to communicate and exchange during difficult times, such as the pandemic we have just been witnessing for a couple of years. So we are working with Smart Africa to develop two main operations, which has of great interest for the continent. One is the One Africa network, and the bank has provided a grant for the feasibility study of this continental project. And the second is also to develop an African cloud. And we have also recently provided a grant to Smart Africa to fund the feasibility study. And we are ready to provide substantial resources to the implementation of these two continental projects for the transformation, digital transformation of the continent, and as a contribution to the continental free trade agreement. A third area, which is very important, and I would like to congratulate Afreximbank for taking the lead in the payment system. As you know, one of the main impediments which hamper the development of trade, intra-African trade, is the issue of payment. And the system which has been developed by the Afreximbank, the PAPS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, is really a great solution to support the banking system and to make it easier for any economic operator on the continent to exchange with his partners across the continent. And we at PADEA, we thought it would be also very useful to link this system to another system which is going to be implemented in the Arab countries, which is called BUNA, which is sponsored by the Arab Monetary Fund. And we have been successful in joining the effort of the two systems, and hopefully we will come up with an integration between the two systems, which will enable any business activity in the Arab world or in Africa to exchange with others in the other countries. So one last point also, which is quite important, is the issue of micro, small and medium enterprises. And as you know, these represent quite a significant portion of the economies of our countries, almost 90% of the economic tissue. And PADEA has recently launched a coalition to support micro, small and medium enterprises in Africa. Why a coalition? Because we noticed that almost any institution working on the continent has an initiative to support micro, small and medium enterprises. But when we meet the micro and small and medium enterprises, they do believe that they are not really reaping the benefit of these initiatives. Why these initiatives are not efficient so far? Because each institution is working in silo. So what we need is to provide a holistic approach and to provide an integrated solution which will enable the micro, small and medium enterprises to get the financing, but also to get the guarantee, to get the coaching, to get the support, to get market access, to get the digital infrastructure, and so on. So we need to sit all around one same table and put all our effort jointly to better support micro, small and medium enterprises.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tar. Really appreciate you joining us for this session. I'd like to go now to Mr. Ekwe. You are the president of the West Africa Development Bank. And for me, success with this question is, after this session, many people should be asking you for your business card. So my question essentially is to appreciate a little better how COVID has changed your role in terms of how you're supporting businesses. Can you just speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for your question. The thing is, in such situations, crisis situation, when a crisis occurs, there's one lesson throughout the history. The first lesson is, first thing being first, the first lesson is to consider that cash is king. Cash is king. Liquidity is king. If you take the example of a number of central banks repurchasing program for the past years, in a few words, you look at the US. The US, the Federal Reserve, has been repurchasing assets up to, read my lips, up to 20% of the US GDP, which is approximately 4 to 5 trillion US repurchasing program. Assets, again cash. If you look at the European Union has the European Central Bank has reinjected, again through the same mechanism, assets against liquidity up to 1.6, 1.7 trillion US, which is approximately 10% of the European GDP. And when you translate this into our word, we have considered that cash being king, we had to inject immediately fast disbursement. That's what we have done for up to 500 million euro. Immediate disbursement accessible either to the sovereign, to the public, and to the private sector. Immediate, so cash, so that we can refuel the engine and make sure that we keep the ball running. This is the first thing. The second thing is, and which is basically our fundamental role that's been described into our strategic plan called Joliba Plan, the name of this river, you know, gathering almost the eight countries of our region. Basically, the idea is to foster the development on 5 major sectors, which are, and that would not come to a surprise to anyone here, which are infrastructure. Today, as we speak, we have like 7% of our balance sheet dedicated to infrastructure as a whole. Now, so infrastructure, one. Energy, and we have decided...
Sorry, did you say 70% or 7%?
70%.
Oh,
70.
Yeah. 17, okay.
70.
Right.
So then energy. And again, that cannot come to surprise to anyone here. And we have decided to make it a specific goal, because no development without energy. That's an obvious goal, right? The third thing is agriculture, with the two extremes. The first one being food security. The second extreme being agrobusiness and agribusiness. How do we go up the chain? How do we go up the value chain? All right. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing is everything related to real estate, and notably everything related to social housing. Again, when you look at the situation in our region and in Africa in general, you have like the median age of our population, it's 20 years. 20 years. And you know that the population doubles every generation, which means every 20 to 25 years. In our region, we have like 150 million inhabitants. In 20 years, we will be 300 million, which is the current population of the US. So the challenges are huge. So the questions of social housing is critical. The last, but surely not the least, sector is everything related to health and education. And the pandemic, again, has put on the table this idea that everything related to health and education was the battle of the battles. So the last thing I would like to add, if I may, yes, is the question of the strengthening of our Tier 1 capital. It is obvious for all of us, and I think my brothers sitting here and there would agree with me, the question of the equity, the Tier 1 capital is critical. And we need to strengthen that. And I know that from our experience, we know where the money is. We know where to tap the capital market. Brother Solomon said a word about this. We know where the market is, right? We know how to deal with things. Now, the question is, how do we strengthen our Tier 1 capital to fully play our role?
Thank you for that. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that development finance institutions, multilateral ones on the continent, require more capital, and we need to get them that capital. So, Sanjeev, let me hear from you on that point, just taking it a bit further, especially in the context of the pandemic and its impact, capital raising for DFIs right now. What's the experience like? Because one of the things we're trying to take away from this session is to better appreciate where you're at, because the ask is big. Sergio just spoke about the enormous challenges. Many will be expecting that the DFIs will be coming to the table. But on the capital raising side, what would you say about the environment now?
Yeah, so obviously, good morning to everybody, and thank you. And I'm sorry if I'm going to end up repeating a bit of what has been already said, because it's very difficult to hear the other speakers. Solomon, my apologies if I say all the things you said. So, you know, there is a beautiful English saying which goes like this, that the more things change, more they remain the same. And I have to confess that the experience that we have had over the last 2 years, post-COVID, and the experience we are going through is very, very profoundly felt in terms of how similar it is to the experience on the African continent for generations, right? And the way I explain it is this, that if you really look at the way the narrative and the reality of the world over the last 250 years has worked, it has worked on this implied principle that the global north knows what it's doing, and the global north is unlikely to face any crisis, while the global south generally don't know what they're doing, and from time to time will need to be helped out. Right? That has been the narrative. And I think the COVID experience turned it on its head, because for the first time in living history, you had the global north feeling vulnerable, feeling scared, feeling anxious. And what that did is it put a very sharp relief into this aspect of the reliance the global south has always had towards the global north. That wasn't forthcoming. For many, many months in the initial period of the crisis, you could see the insularity, the inward-lookingness of the world, which had so much more to offer. So for us on the African continent, I think it was a seminal moment. It was a moment to look at ourselves and say, what is it we can do to sort our problems out? And indeed we have. If you see the evidence out there, I think we need to actually applaud ourselves. Now, how did that happen? So if I may just go into the AFC story, like any other MFI here, I'm sure they'll agree, we had to go very granular, very quickly, understand where the stresses are in our portfolio, where cash was required immediately, where projects could be delayed or deferred, and come to a conclusion. Right. After that, we looked at our own balance sheet. We looked at our capital structure, our own liquidity, and we did what I think any responsible institution should have done and would have done. And that is to see whether our rating itself stands the test. Remember, we are very highly rated. We are rated A3 by Moody's. So we actually got a reaffirmation of our rating in the peak of the COVID period. And that then allowed us, beautifully so, to go to the markets with a serious degree of confidence, knowing we knew how our portfolios were doing and knowing that the rating agencies were behind us. And that allowed us to raise, over the last 18 to 20 months, you asked about capital, roughly, I think, $2 to $2.5 billion of new cash. It came in many forms. It came in terms of long-term bonds. It came in terms of Tier 1 capital. It came in terms of tier 2 capital, but it came. And what it told us is that there is room for the MFIs to work alongside the global capital markets to solve the African conundrum.
Right.
Because credit was obviously being priced out of the market, so people were looking for institutions with quality rating to work with. Now, why do I say this? I want to bring it back to where I started, that this to me tells us that if we focus on what is in our control, which is project development, making projects bankable, managing the projects in terms of crisis, money is available out there.
Right.
It's not true that money is not available. And that's where I would stop for now.
If I can just follow on that point, and in the report that I quoted earlier, one of the things that I observed there was that it seems like there is now a trend where funding for DFIs is getting somewhat shorter than it used to be, say, 10 years ago. Would you agree that's the case, as opposed to maybe 18-year type capital is out there? It's now more like 13 years, 12 years, something like that.
No, I mean, if you're talking about the tenor,
yes, tenor
of your, let's call it your...
because that matters too, doesn't it?
Now, that is not true. That has certainly not been our experience. As a matter of fact, there are buckets of capital out there. There is a short-term bucket. Then there is quite a large growing bucket around what I call tier 2 interest, where people are interested in putting 15, 18-year tier 2 capital. And interestingly, there is a huge bucket now under the theme of resilience and climate.
Right. And hopefully we get to
and
that
I
soon.
do want to talk about it a little later if you give me the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, but in the meantime, let me go to the CEO of the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, Engineer Sombo. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
So let's talk a bit about cooperation with the Arab nations and Africa. How are you working to promote more trade cooperation, and what has been your experience? Can you just briefly speak to that?
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be with you today, and thank the Africa Exim Bank for their kind invitation. I think MDBs, you know, if we talk generally, they have a mandate, you know, to continue support member countries in good times and in bad times. You know, enhancing economic and social development is a continuous process. So, you know, I think talking about IATF, IATF is the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, is a trade-devoted organization that is a member also of the Islamic Development Bank group. We also have one aim is to continue provide trade solutions for member countries. 2/3 is from Africa. Talking about really first of all, the organization was very successful to mobilize and finance more than $60 billion since 2008. And of course, Africa financing and programs were almost half of that. So since the beginning, the IATF actually was established during crisis. We remember the 2008, 2010, and we also had the 2014, the financial crisis. So all over the years, we started building muscles actually to really continue to serve member countries during these difficult times. So when COVID-19 came, okay, the IATF was quite ready to really support member countries during this very difficult time. Our main concern was, as I said, is to continue to support. The other thing is that our concern is to really continue to partner with our partners so that we can maximize the impact in member countries during this very difficult time. We have really strategic partners in Africa and in other member countries. Of course, at the top of these partners are the Africa Exim Bank, and also Badia, and they are very strategic. In addition, of course, to enhance our aim was to enhance the synergy among the group. IDB Group is a very unique group where we do see institutions that is devoted for trade, institution that is devoted for insurance and export credit insurance to promote export. And we have also the ICD, which is the Islamic Cooperations for the Private Sector Development. In addition, of course, to the mother company, which is the IDB. The four of us, we do have really good products to offer to member countries. So I think since the establishment, since the start of the pandemic, we've came up with something called the 3R. The 3R program, which is a $2.3 billion package to support member countries during the COVID-19. The first R is the Respond R, where we are actually responding to the pressing needs of member countries in terms of really providing medical equipments and also health services, transferring knowledge through, at that time, was very focused webinars. And then the the recovery period is the second phase where we are today. We would like to see the economies of member countries come back again. And the third one is the restart, where hopefully this is a longer term package that is going to also support member countries in a longer period. Right. ITFC actually, participated heavily in the first and second now, by providing, as I said, almost $800 million out of the 2.5. This is in addition, of course, to its normal program during the COVID-19. So the programs were, as I said, mentioned since the pandemic. We felt that there is a need to go and revisit the strategy of ITFC and to see how we can realign to really meet the needs of member countries. A strategy has been updated many times, but this time we felt the needs of member countries under the uncertainty and this very turbulent, environment. We need really to see also how the needs change. New sectors came in for ITFC, the health sector, and also the tourism sector. So we felt that we need to really do a lot in these sectors. The program is very successful, and we have really made sure that it is implemented smoothly. Now, of course, ITFC has, in addition to financing, as I said, we finance about 60 billion, the ability actually to mobilize resources. That's why we try to always have partners, development institutions, financial institutions, in member countries, that we work together to really support both actually the government and also support the private sector. We extended many lines of financing to these financial institutions. In addition to that, of course, we extended trade development packages and programs, events, and believe it or not, everything was really virtual, and we had not had any challenges from any member country. And that's really a testimony that we really appreciate, that ITFC is considered a preferred, creditor, or we enjoy the preferred creditor status in member countries, and I thank them, especially here in Africa, despite of the turbulences and despite difficult times and the high impact of the pandemic. They kept their promises and they kept really supporting ITFC so that we continue to support them in addition. We came up with a number of flagship programs that is very important for Africa. And as I said in the beginning, it was the Africa Initiatives, $1 billion in the beginning, but now we have much bigger program, which is actually the Arab-Africa Trade Bridge, which is also contributing to this very important event, which is the IATF. This bridge, we try to build bridges actually between the Arab and African countries, in addition to, of course, supporting the needs of the African countries and needs of the Arab countries through a number of really products, a number of areas, insurance, trade finance, trade development, supporting the private sector, and in addition, of course, to other capacity building programs. The Arab-Africa Trade Bridge actually is one of the biggest really partners is the Africa Exim Bank, and also we have Badia as well. They contribute, the IDB itself contributing, and also we have the support from the other entities, which is the ISEC, and we work with international institutions as well as partners, like the ITC and others, who come together really to implement this multi-stakeholder, multi-partners, program. The program is going well, and every year we see the increase of member countries who are coming to support really this program from Africa and from the Arab countries. The other one is, of course, the Africa SME Development Program. Very unique program where we support the SMEs, as I said yesterday, to submit bankable projects, because most of the rejection rates is actually coming because they don't really meet the KYCs and they don't meet sometimes bank requirements. Banks likes to, I don't know if the bankers here would agree with me or not, but they like to go with mostly big companies sometimes. We felt that SMEs constitute a high percentage of the economic tissue in member countries. We need to support them. Not that, but also we train the banks. We extend training also with the banks under the umbrella of the government sometimes, but we extend this tripartite agreement where we can support. Believe it or not, the rejection rates were down from countries like Burkina Faso, like in Senegal, like all these where we really supported the SMEs through this very, very important program. And in the same time, you are offering also training in Islamic trade finance as well, for member countries, so they understand how we operate and how we really, support member countries. And
Mr. Zombo, I'm so sorry. I really have to jump in.
I'm going to close down. Because the subject is quite. But I really appreciate really all the support that we are getting from our partners, and we are, of course, will continue to support Africa, because Africa is really the future. If it is not today, Africa is the future of for the African people. And of course, the CFTA is my final point. We have a very special program which is called the ITFC/IDB African CFTA initiative, where we are supporting 30 activities and projects under this, and also supporting the capacity building of member countries to be able to maximize the benefit from the CFTA agreement. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for very comprehensive review of what you're doing. So we've spoken a lot about challenges, especially with respect to capital. You've spoken about your activities, obviously, but now let's talk about the needs of those who perhaps need your services the most. And I'm speaking about the small businesses across Africa, because as we know, Africa is dominated by small businesses. And the growth of Africa is really will be a reflection of the growth of small business. So, Mr. Tadese, if you can speak to this and about what you're doing at the Trade and Development Bank. As we look forward, what needs to change, or what must you add to the services that you provide with respect to small businesses as a community, the development finance institutions like yourself? If you can speak briefly to that.
Thank you, Oleg. Pleased to be here with everybody else on the panel. I think I'll just echo what all my colleagues said. We are partners. We work very closely together across various sectors. And in case you think this has always been the case, it's not quite true. I think today we do so much more together than was the case 5 or even 10 years ago. It's deeper and it's broader. And I think that's a very refreshing development for the continent.
That's true.
The other thing I should just highlight is, we're talking about MFIs in this panel. And the one thing that is obvious is we tend to be either African or Afrocentric MFIs. There's many other MFIs who work in Africa, but they're not on the panel. Some of them are much bigger. Actually, many of them are much bigger than most of us. So what is special about this group of MFIs on this panel? I think what's special is the fact that we're talking very much about trade. And this is what makes this group of MFIs particularly relevant to the issue of the AFCFTA. Because we are very interested in investing in trade, production, and diversification of our economies. This is an area of engagement that really receives a lot of focus from African MFIs. Global MFIs would look at many other issues, the SDGs broadly, the climate finance issues, and also development assistance. But we have that particular premium that we represent, which is supporting African enterprises. Because when you talk about trade, what are you talking about? You're talking about African business. And when you're talking about trade, you're talking about production. Mm-hmm. So the kind of value addition we provide as African MFIs is to address this issue of growing out of poverty. Not development assistance, because that's not really our strength. Some of us on this panel have concessional funding and grant funding, but that is not really the dominant nature of the money we represent. Most of us on this panel are development financiers. And what development finance means is you're financing sustainable transactions, whether they're investment or whether they're trade, they actually repay themselves. So that type of MFI that we represent is very important to the AFCFTA agenda. SMEs are 90% of African businesses. So clearly we all try our best to reach them. But I think one has to be a little bit honest. MFIs, we are continental. Many of us have offices in countries. We try to be on the ground, but we are actually supranationals. We're not firmly on the ground in all countries. And the nature of SMEs is they need local presence in a way that usually MFIs are not very strong at providing. So what we tend to do as TDB, like I think many of my colleagues do, is we provide wholesale support to intermediaries who tend to be closer to the ground and who can deal with much larger volumes of smaller enterprises who need regular interaction. And in many cases, they need local currency solutions, not hard currency solutions, which is what most of us represent. Of course, there's room for both, but oftentimes the SMEs are actually operating in a local economy. It's not exclusively that. We're hoping the AFCFTA will create more opportunities beyond the national economy. But the national banks, the commercial banks in all of our countries are very important players in this area of SMEs. So what we try to do, we throw our weight behind the commercial banks in many of the countries that we work in. And sometimes we'll provide financing, other times we'll provide guarantees, share the risk so that they can do more. They're better placed and more fit for purpose in terms of reaching those smaller players on a more regular basis. But I think all of us on this panel do work with national intermediaries. Sometimes they're microfinance institutions, sometimes they're specialized.
I just wanted to jump in there, and because you are spot on, you obviously are not on the ground everywhere, but the evolution of that relationship with the local partners, how do you see that changing moving forward? Or is it pretty much just an expansion of what you're doing now?
Well, I think the same way I was commenting at the outset, we as partners are doing so much more together than ever before. The same applies to the relationships between us and the national level or subnational level commercial, financial institutions. So there's been a great deal of expansion, right? This is B2B model, it's not B2C, right? So we're supporting other financial institutions. Again, it could be providing liquidity short-term, it could be medium-term financing, or it can be guarantees to share the risk. That doesn't even require you to provide hard currency. Guarantees is a very smart way of supporting local financial institutions because you're not giving them hard currency that becomes sometimes difficult to repay back. What you're doing is you're telling them, take more risk and we will share the risk with you.
Thank you very much. Useful insight there. I mean, Emanuel, before I come to you, I want to go again to Dr. Sidi because I think he has to leave us shortly and as we begin to round up. Dr. Sidi, if you can just intervene again on the point of about infrastructure. I wanted to hear more about how you think institutions can support the development of African infrastructure moving forward, especially in the context of driving greater trade? I believe you are muted. We can't seem to hear you right now.
You hear me now?
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you now.
Okay, so to drive more African intra-trade, infrastructure are really playing a key role. As you know, one of the main impediments which hampers the development of African intra-trade is the lack of adequate infrastructure. And all the MDBs have been working on supporting the continent and supporting our beneficiary countries to develop their infrastructure. Badia, as I said, is proud to have worked with many partners, many other partners, to provide adequate roads in most countries. Today, the situation is also changing because we see new type of needs. We need to develop corridors, and corridors require more financing that what can be offered through the normal business of MDBs. So innovative solutions are required. And part of that is the development of PPP projects. And one of the new area of activity of the bank is exactly to support PPPs in infrastructure, particularly in transport infrastructure, be it toll road or ports, seaport, dry ports, which are also a new type of port which is growing on the continent because of the need to serve the landlocked countries. So our focus in the coming years will be on two main areas of infrastructure. One is supporting those infrastructure which can be funded and which can generate enough income to repay for the loans, and that will be basically through PPP's arrangement. But we will still continue to support publicly funded infrastructure which are basically not financially profitable, and that will be through concessional funding. In this regard, we are working very closely with many partners, and we are mobilizing considerable amount of resources from Arab funds, including the Saudi Development Fund, the Kuwait Fund for Development, the Abu Dhabi Fund, and the recently created Qatar Fund. We are also working with the Islamic Development Bank Group and the OPEC Fund, who are member of the Arab Coordination Group of donors. So basically, for infrastructure, we have this double approach: concessional funding for non-profitable infrastructure project and PPP's arrangement for profitable project in the infrastructure sector.
All right, thank you very much for that useful insight. So Emanuel, let's go to you. And obviously we were speaking about infrastructure. One very notable infrastructure that the Afrexim Bank has been driving is PAPS, that Pan-African Payment System. I think potentially it will be a game changer in the years to come. Well, let's speak about another need of businesses. And Afrexim Bank has nicely created FEDA. Maybe you can just speak briefly to what you do, because you're all about providing equity capital and how far you've come with that.
Right, thank you so much, Wale. So FEDA, which is the acronym for Fund for Export Development in Africa, is one of Afrexim Bank's value-adding initiatives to the continent. The fund has been set up basically as an impact investing fund. We basically invest in equity, largely, but I'll speak more about our strategy. But our instrument is broad-based. We do invest in quasi-equity as well, and can also do that, and I'll speak much more to that. So what are we set up to do? We are set up to, fill the gap that is there from an equity investing perspective. And the reason being that although there are a lot of equity investing businesses on the continent, but you don't have anyone that is specifically focused on trade. And that's what we're set up to do. So we're set up to do three things. Number one, we're set up to support businesses in the intra-African, value chain. So we're basically supporting businesses who products and services, goods and services travel across geographies in Africa. That's number one. Number two, we're set up to support businesses in the what we may call value-added export or export development. So we are saying, for too long, Africa has continued to deal in raw commodities. We want to begin to improve the quality of our exports by adding value. So why should we be exporting cocoa paste and cocoa liquor for so long? We should export chocolate. What about cotton? So there are a lot of products out in the market that we need to add value to. So that's one of the things FEDA will do. The third thing is industrialization. So you find that there are a number of businesses today that are probably importing goods into the continent. We're going to support them through what we do, which is beyond just providing capital, bringing partnership on board to support them sort of begin to move from not just import substitution, because that's not enough, but actually progressing into exporters within the region, which ties into the free trade agreement arrangement as well. Now, in terms of our strategy, we can describe ourselves from a three perspective. First is the equity piece. And the equity piece, we're basically looking at working with third-party businesses, supporting them from an equity investing perspective, because it's been established that in the market, empirically, that the equity funding gap, it's well over $100 billion. So we are there to plug that gap and help businesses. And then we have a second bucket of strategy, which is basically investing in what we call the strategic initiatives of Afreximbank. And these are initiatives that have been identified, to be able to unlock value and also the bottleneck, trade on the continent. So this could be projects around healthcare, projects around quality assurance to support exports, and also projects around industrial parks, which are trade-enabling investments as well. So these are some of the things that we're set up to do. We also have a third strategy, which is credit fund. We basically sets up to partner with other managers to sort of set up a fund. We recently announced our partnership with a manager, and that fund will basically support businesses within the space that the bank is not currently addressing. So whether it's from an instrument perspective, from a time horizon perspective, that very fund is going to basically complement and supplement the business of Afreximbank. So today, in what has been set up to be, at a starting point, $1 billion fund, Afreximbank has seeded FEDA with about $350 million to start. So we are here to support businesses. We put together the team last year, and we've made quite some progress. We've done our first deal. We have about 3 other ones that we've gone through the entire approval process, completed due diligence, and imminently will be announcing. So that's what we're set up to do specifically.
That's quite interesting. But can you just give us a sense of the deal pipeline that potentially that is on the table right now in terms of equity investments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we've done between last year and now has been to sort of announce ourselves, to the market, engage with the market, begin to develop a deal flow pipeline. And it's actually a very good place to be, where we sit, because we have a parent in Afreximbank, and as you know, Afreximbank's network and Afreximbank's, impact on the continent is one that has created room for us to be able to drive our deal flow. From when we started last year till now, we've been able to create a deal flow pipeline of high potential opportunities that totals over $500 million. So these are deals that we've fed into our pipeline, because we're also going to go into the market. So apart from those 3 objectives I told you about, we're also going to end up with foreign direct investment attraction as well onto the continent. So we will be launching our fund, and that fund we're targeting to raise about $500 million. So we
$500 million.
Actually very blessed to have Afreximbank sponsor us and start out this journey with us. And we are very excited about it as a team, and we look forward to this journey with a lot of excitement, because it's a journey to impact Africa. Like I said earlier, this is going to be a game changer on the continent because it's specifically targeted at a space that has not been given enough attention by private equity firms, maybe because they may not understand the space enough, or from a risk-reward perspective, they may not be resourced to be able to deliver in the trade space. So that is where we are in terms of building a pipeline of deals.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that will be very interesting to quite a few people in the room who are looking for equity participation in their businesses as they go across the continent. We really have run out of time for this segment, but since we have Dr. Sidi joining us virtually, I will allow him to give the final word, maybe a few closing remarks as we round this up.
Thank you very much. I do believe that, as mentioned by my colleagues in the panel, the challenge is quite big, but any institution cannot alone be provide enough solution and enough resources to overcome the difficulties. So what we need is to develop the partnership. Been said by Tadesse, we have been working over the past few years to develop the synergies between our institution and to scale up the level of our partnerships. And we do believe that in the future, we need to do more, we need to synergize more, and we need to scale up our activities and to bring as much as possible resources to the continent, be it from donors, ODA, official development assistance, or even private capitals and foreign direct investment. So this is the mandate the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa is taking, and our new strategy by the year 2030, which is very much aligned to the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, and of course to the Global Agenda 2030 for the SDGs. One of the main drivers of this strategy is to bring as much as possible capitals from the Arab world to Africa. And we do believe this will be the value addition of the new strategy for the contribution of Badea to the development of the continent. And we do see already quite a huge potential for the development of this economic relationship between the Arab world and Sub-Saharan Africa. And we are quite confident that in the coming years, a substantial amount of direct investment will come from the Arab world to Sub-Saharan Africa, and also the official development assistance will be increased substantially, and of course the trade flows will develop thanks to the development of the link we are working on between the Pan-African payment system developed by Afreximbank and the Buna Arab system developed by the Arab Monetary Fund, and of course the joint efforts which are exerted by all the members of the Arab Africa Trade Bridge mentioned by Engineer Hani Sumbul, and we thank IATF for hosting that program. So this program is really a very important program. Afreximbank, Badea, OPEC Fund, and others are working with ITFC and IDB Group to develop this program. And we are also happy to notice that most of the Arab and African countries are joining the program. And this program will contribute to the development of trade flows, and definitely will contribute to the development of African continental free trade agreement in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sidi. Very useful insights from all our panelists. If I were just to summarize, I think there are three key takeaways. For me, the multilateral DFIs on the continent need to be ready to organize themselves to raise capital, because that capital is out there. So that's encouraging to know. Then, of course, the partnerships that they have with the local financiers across the continent need to be deepened, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of that. And I think I like the last point about equity participation that Emanuel spoke of, and the fundraising that's he's looking to do along those lines. I think that's quite exciting as well. So I would just say that the DFIs are supportive of small businesses across the continent. Let's engage, and hopefully we can do a lot more. Please, can we put our hands together for the panelists for a very informative conversation. On that note, I'll hand over to Mark.
Are we finished? I think we're done. Could I ask all you wonderful gentlemen, it's gentlemen because there's no ladies in you, it's a manel. A panel, but never mind, it's a good manel. Can you stand please and acknowledge the crowd, please? Thank you very much. Wonderful session, thank you. Now we're going to move on to a session that's quite interesting, one that I've really been looking forward to. Success stories. As these gentlemen, these successful gentlemen leave the stage, we're going to move on to a session called Success Stories IATF 2018 Closed Deal Sessions Roundtable. Now this session is featuring guest speakers from a broad spectrum of businesses that were impacted by their participation in 2018. What's particularly interesting about this session is that it's about deals. And in the middle of this session, we're going to sign a deal in IATF 2021, hence the table you see to the right. So without much ado, I will introduce the moderator of this session, Mr. Obi Emekweku, who is president of Del Reeve Consult Limited, will be running this session. So Obi, I hand over to you.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for the session on success stories. And as you know, the IATF, the real measure of the success of an event like this is what comes out of it at the end of the day. So we are looking back at 2018 and what happened in 2018 and how did it impact certain participants. So we have a good group here coming in today. But to get us rolling, I'm going to invite the Deputy Chairman of the Advisory Council for the IATF, Mr. John Louis Ekra, who is going to make a presentation, and then we'll have the panelists join us later. So I'm inviting President Ekra. President Ekra, you have the floor. And then let me also invite the other panelists. Mr. Ahmed El Sawidi. Mr. Ahmed El Sawidi of El Sawidi Electric. Okay, he's coming shortly. We also have Zodi Gaseb.
We are being confused. Which session is this one? Are you representing?
Closed deal session.
Closed deal session.
Yes.
Who are the speakers? Is this one?
Yes.
These are the guys.
I don't have. said. If not everybody's here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So in between the session, we're going to have a deal signing ceremony. So we'll start off with a presentation by President Ekra, and then we'll have the signing, and then we'll go to the actual panel discussion. So at this point, I'd like to invite President Ekra to make his presentation.
I can speak from here? All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I've been asked to speak about the lessons that were learned from the IATF, the first IATF, 2018, which was organized in Cairo in December 2018. First of all, let me tell you what were the objectives that we were pursuing with the organization of a trade fair. We thought that organizing a trade fair was a critical instrument for the implementation of the EFTA, which offered the continent a unique opportunity to emancipate itself economically and to build the Africa we want. We all know that Africa is a continent that trades the least with itself. In fact, Afreximbank internal research have evidence that the most important cause of the situation is the lack of access to information on trade and markets. Indeed, traders and enterprises, they do not have information on what is produced by other African countries, as well as on demand and investment opportunities in other African countries. Therefore, the trade fair is one practical way to fill the gap which is brought about by this asymmetry of information on trades and markets. There's also the need to take advantage of the huge opportunity offered by the AFCFTA to boost industrialization and creation of added value and to get away from an excessive concentration and dependence on export of commodities. That is the lot of African countries right now. So the first edition of 2018 had about 5 components. The major components were, 1, an exhibition and country days, 2, a conference, 3, business-to-business and business-to-government engagements, a virtual trade fair, and creative industry showcase. Afreximbank and the African Union started by constituting an advisory council, which was instrumental in steering the organization of the fair. It also had the duty to market, to do some marketing and public relations, and also garnering political support. As you're all aware, the advisory council was chaired by President Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of Federal Republic of Nigeria. And in addition to this advisory council, Afreximbank had also onboarded some 27 ambassadors to assist in the promotion and marketing of IATF 2018. And it included the mobilizing exhibitors and sponsorship. The total number of exhibitors was 1,086. The target was about 1,000, but it was exceeded. There were 29 African countries represented, and 16 non-African countries also were represented at the exhibition. There were multilateral institutions, 26 of them, which were represented. The second pillar was the conference. The major theme of the conference was Intra-African trade as an engine for development. And there were a range of strategic discussion, such as creating linkages between business and support government in creating an enabling environment for the private sector. Another strategic discussion was also identifying solutions to those challenges and opportunities affecting intra-African trade and supporting Africa's transformation through industrialization and intra-African trade. The last pillar, or the pillar before last, was business-to-business government engagement. The majority of the deals that were done were in sectors of industrialization, export manufacturing, a total of 6.2 billion in that sector. Power, 6 billion of deals were signed. And financial services, $1.86 billion. Then there were also transport and logistics, heavy industry, mining, infrastructure, healthcare, and SME promotion. The total number of deals were 100 for a total amount of $32.6 billion. Then the final one was virtual trade fair and creative industry showcase. This was one of the key highlights of the trade fair. There were seminars, fashion shows, music, artists, and etc. At the end of the trade fair, surveys were organized to capture feedback and satisfaction among various IATF stakeholders. So among exhibitors, among visitors, and among delegates. That's what I wanted to say as far as the introduction is concerned. We will now be sharing some lesson learned from the participants. I want to hand over encore to Mr. Obi Emekekwe. I thank you. You want to take the...
Okay. Thank you very much, President Ekra. That's a very elucidating presentation on the deals that were signed during the last IATF. For me, the major takeaway from what you're saying is that we have had a total of $32.6 billion in transactions signed at that event. So we are now going to listen to some of the beneficiaries or some of those who actually benefited from those things that were signed, those $32.6 billion. But before we do that, we're going to have a signing ceremony that's going to take place right now. So I'll give it back to Mark to handle that, and then we'll come back and then hear from the panelists.
Thank you, Obi. Thank you very much, Obi. Yes, that's indeed true. It's interesting to hear about the deals that were done in 2018. I think $32 billion, I think it was the estimate that I saw, which may be topped at this IATF. And case in point is an example of a $50 million in the form of project preparation funds for investments. Now, Afrexim Bank and FONSIS, that's the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Senegal, will collaborate through this joint project preparation facilities to unlock investments into sectors such as energy, transport and logistics, logistical platforms such as special economic zones and industrial parks, manufacturing, agro-processing, hospitality and tourism. It still goes on. Mining, solid minerals and services, ICT, healthcare, and the creative economy. Now, the bank and FONSIS aim to mobilize up to $50 million in the form of project preparation funds for investments in Senegal, starting with a pilot phase. The joint project preparation facility will assist the early development process of projects from concept stage to bankability by covering the preparation of feasibility studies, project development and advisory services and related costs. Now, in addition to enhancing bankability, the joint project preparation facility will, on a case-by-case basis, undertake feasibility studies to assess the viability of accessing markets in the sub-region, thereby promoting intra-Africa trade and promoting the AFCFTA. Now, we have two signatories for this deal, and I will call them to the table. I think John, our lawyer at Afrexim Bank, is standing by to guide you to those two chairs that you see in front there to officially sign this deal. And they are Mr. Amra Kamel, who is the Executive Vice President, Business Development Corporates at Afrexim Bank, and Mr. Papa Demba Diallo. He's the Chief Executive Officer of FONSIS. So if you could come, pens at the ready, I think, for you to sign this deal. Congratulations. Congratulations. From that deal, we go back to the discussion. Obi.
Thank you very much, Mark. So we're going back to from success stories of 2018 to success stories of 2021. So we're back on the stage with the panel. Representing El Swedi is Mr. Muetaz Sami, not Mohammed Ahmed El Swedi. You know, yeah, okay. So let me start with you, Mr. Sami. El Swedi was one of the major beneficiaries from the last Intra-African Trade Fair. So what would you say areas where you benefited from in terms of that trade fair?
Thank you. Hello? Yes. First of all, thank you for Afrexim and for all the people and organizations working on Intra-Trade Africa Fair, which support different companies to succeed in Africa, to succeed in signing new deals in Africa and developing all the African countries on several projects and several sectors. We at Sweden Electric have succeeded in the last IATF exhibition in Egypt to sign a deal for $150 million with Afrexim, a bilateral facility, which supported us to finance or partial finance to build the Julius Nyerere, the Tanzanian hydropower dam. This event gives us the support to sign the contract that we have a bank in our supporting us. So this is a part of a success story that in African DFI or African bank supporting an African company, an Egyptian company, to build a hydropower for development of the electricity and the water in Tanzania, in African country. So this is a full story of a success in signing a one deal in the event.
Excellent. You know, transactions like these actually are measured in terms of their impact on people.
Yes.
So let me just ask you, the hydropower plant.
Yeah.
What is the, how does it affect people in both Egypt and the countries where you are doing these projects?
Okay. First of all, this project, for building a dam, and a huge dam, which can have electricity for 2,115 megawatt, this need many workers and many engineers. So we supported at Sweden Electric and Arab Contractor, our partner in the project. The two companies are Egyptian companies. We supported with almost over than 5K engineer and blue-collar workers in this project. And also we have almost more than 2,000 to 3,000 worker and engineer locally from Tanzania. The team are building the dam. The second thing that the place where we built the dam, it had a very big problem because of the water. So this dam is controlling the water, controlling the flow of the water, and also it's increasing the energy capacity in Tanzania, so they can, in the future or the near future, they can export this energy.
Thank you so much. That's a very significant impact in terms of what the project will deliver. So let me turn to Zodi Gaseb. I'm going to ask you the same question. You know, basically, you see yourself as a beneficiary also from your participation in the last IATF. So how did that participation affect you? What did it bring to you? What are the benefits you can point to from your participation?
It was quite impactful because we were a small pavilion, of Namibians, especially in the cosmetic sector, that was just there to exhibit the products. But then also we managed to secure a few deals in terms of raw material, especially in terms of trading our indigenous oils with places like Nigeria and Ghana. And then also it was very important for us to see how the market reacted to our products and in terms of the quality. So we were able to gather quite a lot of data from that as well, and take that data back to Namibia and then implement it in various sectors that we worked with, like the Trade Forum, the Cosmetics Association, and a few other local partners as well.
Thank you very much. So you were able to do some networking out of this participation. So how have you been able to build on those networks? Have they really contributed to your efforts to broaden the scope of your operations?
Yes, definitely. For me in particular, with regards to my company, we were able to scale up, definitely, because of the demand of the products. We were also able to secure a few networks in Europe and in the US as well, would encourage the export of our products, but not just in terms of my company alone, but other local products as well. So yes, definitely some amazing networks there.
Thank you. President Tekra, I'm going to come back to you again.
Okay.
You set out to make some impact through the IATF2018 as a deputy chairman of the advisory council. I'm sure you are very happy with the outcome that we came with. So looking forward, what will be your advice to companies trying to participate in IATFs? How should they prepare? What should they expect, coming in?
First of all, you see, being in international trade is totally different than just being in local trade. Because once you start exporting, there are so many technical things you have to go through to export. First of all, most of the exports are regulated. You have to have standards, you have to have format, and so on. So you don't just decide to go international. It's a different business altogether. Yes. So that is why when we were thinking about the structure of the first trade fair, we thought that there should be also components to help our private sector, African private sector, to come to terms with the trade. And it's a good example that we just had. She started seeing the world differently from where she was before. Yes. And that's, for us, already a positive outcome. And we are conscious that it is a long effort. You have traders who have been trading internationally for 100 years. So it's not something also that you believe after one or two trade fairs, you've done it. So we are thinking long term. This year, we are here in Durban. We were supposed to be in Kigali, but because of the COVID. Yes. And we're lucky that the government of South Africa and the city of Durban was ready, because this infrastructure was not built, it was there. Yeah. Whereas in most African countries, you will have to either build or develop what is there so that you can host it. So we're lucky that we were able to do that in a short span of time. But the major component that we had in 2018, we tried to use them and improve them. Yeah. That's what lessons learned are for. Going forward, the component of creative industries, which we believe is a very important sector to develop in our continent, because we have talented youth in Africa, more talented than in many other places of the world. But we need to create the enabling environment for them. Yes. We need to guide them. We need to accompany them. And the format of this year gives also a large space to this expression from the youth. That's one part. The other part, we will also be drawing lessons for this one, from this one, yes, going forward.
Yes. No, thank you very much, President Ekra. Let me turn back to Mr. Sami. LCWD is a large organization with lots of employees, and they're doing multi-billion-dollar transactions. What would you say to other major African large corporations like yours in terms of the value of participating in a trade fair like this?
Okay, first of all, I would like to say something that we all need to think about it. Africa, we have the opportunities, we have the demand, and we have the capabilities to succeed, to fulfill this demand and these opportunities. But the problem is that no one of the DFIs want to take a high risk on the countries, so they give small tickets. This, let's say, it cannot support the corporates in Africa or the local companies to do these jobs. The European companies, they come with their arm of finance, which is international financer from their country, like ECAs, like something. They give better tenor, they give better interest rate. So that's the problem, that the African countries, we have the companies, we have the capacity, we have all the capabilities to succeed and to do these projects to develop the African countries. and support the trade inside Africa, to support the developing of all the African region. But the problem is almost all the time is the finance.
Financing.
Yes, this is the main problem.
Okay, so that's a message to the financing institutions across the continent that financing is a major challenge for corporations trying to do the kind of thing that we need to do on the continent. Let me turn to Ms. Gasseb again. Coming to the IATF 2018, I'm sure you have some expectations of what to expect. So looking back now, did you come out feeling that what you met was what you expected, or that your ideas changed at the end of the trade fair? You know?
Oh, they definitely changed because I don't think I had that many expectations because it was the first one. So it was really interesting to see coming back and really discussing how to take the cosmetic sector of Namibia forward. And how to implement things like standards, for instance, and good manufacturing practices, and how to tap into what we already have and strengthen that as well. So it was really quite an eye-opening experience, and we still discuss it up to today, and the impact it actually has had on the cosmetic sector and other entrepreneurs in Namibia. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So I believe that we have an opportunity for a number of questions from the audience who might have some things you'd like the panel to respond to. So we can take a few questions because time is a bit of an issue for us today. Anything, show of hands if you have a question for us. Okay, I don't. Okay, that's a hand there. Okay. Yes. Can we get a microphone to him? Right there, okay.
Merci. Je voulais poser la question aux deux entrepreneurs. Qu'est-ce qui passe dans la tête de quelqu'un qui vient à une foire comme ça et qui repart avec des possibilités, et quelles sont les exigences que la personne se fixe pour augmenter sa capacité et rester raisonnable dans l'utilisation de ces fonds et s'épargner comme aujourd'hui. Et aujourd'hui, comment eux, ils se comportent vis-à-vis de leur ancien statut?
Sorry, I think we have a problem with translation and clarity.
No, I can help in that.
Okay, if you can help, yes, President.
I can help in that. No, he was asking the two people who are here, who have done deals.
Yes.
What was in your mind at the time you were doing the deal? How did you feel? And what has changed for you? Because obviously once you get a deal, you also need to start preparing yourself for a different situation for you. So he would just want to understand how just one feel going through that process of getting a big deal in a forum like this one, and then what is next for you? How does it change your the way you operate?
You want to go?
Okay. First of all, when we sign a deal, when we see a big deal, we must look for our parties. Our parties is our partnership if there is a joint venture or a partner on the project or something, and the partners here also comes on the banks, which will support us in the transaction. When we sign the deal, we calculate all the risk. And let me tell you something, there must be a risk, and we must take it in consideration, that it's a part of development. After we sign the deal, it's the most important project for the company. Each signing, it's the most important. It's not about the size, it's about the commitment you sign on yourself or on the company itself for the country. So once we sign, we put all the expertise on this project, everything to deliver the quality, deliver the service expected from the client or from the government. So this will help us as a word of mouth for transferring the experience for a different government or something. Sweden Electric once entered any country, the government know about Sweden Electric because of the success stories done in several countries or in the African continent. So this put a pressure on the company that we must be all time on the same service, same quality, and to meet the client experience or the expectations.
Thank you. Gazab, do you have anything to add?
From my side, I would say that I went in as an exhibitor. So coming out of that, my mindset was completely changed because I came in with like one way of thinking, and basically the idea was to sell my products and network, but not in terms of trading. So during that entire process, my way of thinking, way of doing things, and way of dealing completely changed. And I had to strategize immediately on how I want to approach various deals and so forth, and also just what I need to get ready in order to make my business a success.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there's one more question there at the end there. Can you get a microphone? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the success story, and my question has two parts. The first part is, how are we working as a continent to make sure that most of these big infrastructures are being continued to be financed by financial institutions in Africa rather than depending on financial institutions outside?
I didn't hear you from...
Yes, sorry, can you just speak a bit more slowly so we can...
Thank you. I said I'm Steven Matinya from Tanzania, working with CRDB Bank. My question is, the first part, how are we as African continent aligned ourselves or prepared to be able to finance most of these big projects in Africa with African banks instead of depending much of banks from outside Africa? That's first part. And the second part, this again, depending on the experience you have had with the success stories we had, how are we able to compete to get tenders which are being done by African companies compared to other companies, say from Europe or from China, like what Elsewed has done? So what is good? What are the learning points? What are the things that need to be focused? Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I'm not sure that's...
I didn't hear everything, but I will reply. I think part of it, the second question you're talking about, how we will succeed to compete the Chinese in the tenders, right? Okay. Let me tell you something. We all have the experience. We all can partner with a European company or a Chinese company to have the know-how of exact part. For example, the hydropower built in Tanzania, which we are building now, we have a subcontractor, it's a Chinese company, because of the turbines. We're bringing the turbines as per the Tanzanian instruction that they need this type of turbine. So it's not a problem to partner with a European or Chinese company, but the main contractor in the project is the Egyptian companies, which they signed and which they take the risk for the project and which they will deliver the project for the government. So I think this part for the second question. Regarding the first question, regarding the finance in Africa, it's the problem that we have DFIs. They can finance projects, but to certain amount and certain tenor. which will not fulfill the country needs or the country requirements. So that's why we go to the international financer, which can provide an extra tenor, more than 10 years, like the export credit agencies or something, and they can provide a better pricing interest rate. So that's why I'm asking for, if the DFIs in Africa try to support more the African companies and the countries which can provide extra tenor or number of years, which can fulfill the needs of the government. That's the point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. President, do you want to add anything on this question of
Yes,
financing?
I think he said it. Technically speaking, I believe African companies like El Swedi are able to compete. The whole issue will be the financing terms. If they can be accompanied by an institution like Afrexim Bank, who can access international market at also good terms and pass it on to them, then they will be able to compete with European and other Chinese firms. It's essentially the particularity that most of the international companies bring is the finance. Otherwise, technically, everybody can compete.
Yeah, thank you very much on that one. Do we have any final questions before we... Yeah. Okay, I don't see any hands up anymore, so I'm going to ask the panelists for any final comments before we round up. Okay.
For me...
I think your mic.
Okay. For me, we are happy to develop and support the African countries. We have the capabilities in the African content that we can do any type of project, the experience is there and the need is there. So what we are looking for to the DFIs, the African DFIs, support in the finance. It's the major point that can increase all the type of project and develop all the African countries. That's my point. It's the finance.
So please, guys, have any final comments?
I would say that tap into events such as this. Networking is such a brilliant tool to upscale your business and, excuse me, to upscale your business and just to tap into